Hello everybody, welcome back to the Premier Injuries channel. Now today, Ben is here on the line. I think you can speak, Ben,
I can.
to let people know that you're here. But the problem is that with the new computer, there's new problems, and that'll be ironed out for next week's show. So you're here in um, in,
Spirit.
in spirit. You're here in person, but we cannot see you for some reason. And I think Zoom are being pretty cheeky in not allowing you to speak. But yes, so Mr. Ben, how are you doing today?
Yeah, all good, mate. All good. To be honest, I'm looking forward to the end of the season, if the truth be told.
Yes, but we've still got a few more game weeks to go, and game week 35 is another exciting one. So let's start off with Bournemouth's team news. What is the latest from the Cherries?
Yeah, we've just actually heard from Gary O'Neill within the last couple of minutes. Um, Pretty disappointing, I think, from the Cherries camp. We've got no expected returners. Um, But I suppose the silver lining on that cloud is that the Cherries are more or less assured of their top flight status. So that means Marcus Tavernier, we know he had another hamstring setback. He's in a race against time to play against this season. We're hoping that Hamid Traore would recover from a foot problem. That still hasn't happened. But again, optimistic that he may be back for one or two of those remaining fixtures. And also, we've seen Kiefer Moore forced off following his introduction last weekend against Leeds. That was a head injury. He was taken off as a precaution. He's been through the concussion protocols, but this game comes too soon.
Now, somebody has said it's Magic 69. They said, "Are you Ben White?" Because obviously on screen it's just showing a white blank screen.
Very good.
Yeah, very good indeed. I'm just starting to think as well that maybe this is an excuse for you again to not show your shoes because you've ordered new ones to cover up the fact that they were indeed Crocs. Can you confirm or deny that, Ben?
Um, at this moment in time, I'm not able to offer a comment. Um, I mean, it could be, we could have this issue because I'm sitting behind this microphone naked. That is
Yes,
another other possible explanation.
that's true. That's true. I wouldn't like to share that information because obviously there's the OnlyFans account that is obviously pending for
It's
release.
dual cameras running at the same time.
That'll be the new kind of content you can look forward to over the summer. I mean, we got to fill with something, don't we? Brian says, "Don't worry, it just accentuates your lovely Geordie tones." And GV says, "Hello, guys. Hello to everybody. Geo Boys, Rubber Ducky." And Vigelis. We will get on to Haaland soon, but as always, we go through the teams alphabetically. So Arsenal up next. Very good win for the team, but another injury concern at the back there. Gabriel looks to be out for this game at least. What is the latest for the Gunners in terms of injury news?
Yeah, so the official line from Mikel Arteta, we didn't expect much in terms of insight, is that a decision on Gabriel will be made on Saturday, hoping to be involved in some aspect of training. Now, what I would say ordinarily, I would have the centre back ruled out of the game at St James's Park, but we always need to contextualize at this stage of the season. And mathematically, yes, they still are in that title race, whether you believe it or not. And bodies will be put on the line, decisions will be taken with very much with that short-termism about it. So, you know what, like I say, would he be 100%? No. Could he could he be included in that starting 11? I certainly wouldn't rule it out, like saying, given the gravity of this game on Tyneside. Big match, tough game. Obviously, Manchester City will be playing against Leeds on Saturday, so the Gunners will know exactly what they need to do. For the purposes of the predicted lineup, I've obviously brought Rob Holden in there, who dropped out against Chelsea on Tuesday night. But elsewhere within the squad, Mikel Arteta has got to go. all out. He's got to go strong. I know he made a couple of changes. I think it was 3 changes against their London rivals. We've seen Trossard come in, but that was more of a freshening up of the team. We've seen a surprise. I was very surprised to see Thomas Partey drop out of that starting 11. But look, it was a great performance by Arsenal, albeit Chelsea didn't put up too much of a fight.
Steve has said that, God, I hope the camera doesn't start working. So cheeky little comment there to
Cheers.
you. Lots of shots fired on this one today, Ben.
Yeah, back to the OnlyFans account.
Yeah. Maybe that's what he's waiting for. He doesn't want it to be spoiled. Aston Villa are up next. The Villains. I like this game a lot. I think this will be a high-scoring game. Wolves, if people haven't checked it out, over on FF Scout website, I've written an article called When Teams Have Nothing to Play For. I've looked at the data. You should check it out because it shows you that in those end-of-season games, there's a lot of high variance. And I think Ollie Watkins could be onto a banger of a game week here because Wolves... They're already not a very good side defensively, but now they've got nothing to play for. Aston Villa have a lot to play for. They're playing good football. I think it could be a high-scoring match. But what do you think on this one, Ben? Is there any injuries that should stop the team from playing well?
Yeah, we haven't seen much movement in the Villa treatment room over the past few weeks, but this week we have seen the return of Boubacar Kamara, Matty Cash, Philip Coutinho, and also Leon Bailey. So all 4 players are nearing a return, but given their length of absence, particularly Coutinho, which is a hamstring problem that goes back to February, I wouldn't expect any of those players to be seriously pushing for a start. Maybe an outside chance of making the match day squad, but that'll be a decision for Unai Emery to make. I think I do expect Villa to be unchanged. They've been on a great run. Disappointing result last weekend. I think they probably would have fancied maybe to take something off Manchester United, but that wasn't to be the case. The only concern for me, just touching upon a point that you raised, is it's a West Midlands derby, and derby matches, the form book tends to go out the window, and I agree with you with that that Wolves team under Lopetegui don't have a great deal of quality about them, but like I say, there's something about derby games where they will be pumped up for that, and they'll want bragging rights, and of course they're a bit of a wounded animal after that result against Brighton, so they'll want to put out a performance for the supporters. And I don't think it'll be as easy as maybe you suggest, but like I say, I think Villa could just edge it to keep, their outside chances of maybe a European qualifying place alive.
It's a very good point, actually, in terms of the derby. I didn't factor that in with my thinking. I was thinking too kind of data analytics and didn't factor in the emotional side as well. Brentford up next in terms of team news. As always, we say no news on Tony. I guess no news is good news on it. Difficult game against Liverpool, or is it, Ben? What do you think on this one?
Look, I think is it 6 straight now for Liverpool, 5 or 6 straight. Haven't really been putting the performances, but they've been grinding out results. So that pleases Jurgen Klopp. And like I say, I think this will be another closely fought contest. I think Brentford have just dipped a little bit in their form at the wrong time. I know they got a good result last weekend, a late winner, but for me, like I say, those European spots are just going to be a little bit, a bridge too far. Christoph Ayer is a player who comes back into contention, but I'm not seeing much change in these lineups. What we're going to see now is those teams who are just playing once every 5, 6 or 7 days. I don't necessarily see, there's certainly no need to freshen squads. There's enough recovery time between those matches for managers to more or less, retain a really strong nucleus of the team. The problems that you do have sometimes with maybe the Brentford teams, there are a lot of players who are of a very similar ilk, and there's not much. You could look at the number 9, Kevin Shaw up front. Jonas Wissa, who's just signed a new 3-year contract. On the right hand side, we have seen Roslev come in for Hickey. Zanka is another possibility at centre back, maybe in a 3-5-2. But like I say, I've went for a pretty settled lineup with Janelt in the centre of that park, with Christian Norgard expected to miss those remaining fixtures.
A very good update there for the team then. Brighton up next. They managed that last minute winner against Manchester United yesterday. Good match to watch. I thought they played excellent football as well, and they definitely deserved that win, in my opinion. Don't know if any of the Man United fans are now going to steamroller in like usual. Apologies there. But game week 35, do you think that the schedule is going to get on top of them and that we're going to see more rotation again? Because that was the main worry this game week, and we saw it. A lot of people brought in the likes of Mitoma March and they got burnt, and now we're seeing again a tight fixture schedule. Could this be a problem towards the end of the season? A lot of people are going, right, they've got a double game week left, but could it actually not be as good as we once thought?
Yeah, absolutely. And I was one of those SPL managers who did get his fingers burnt. We haven't seen a lot of rotation from Roberto De Zerba previously, but dropped a bombshell last weekend against Wolves. There were 5 changes in the team. That included the likes of McAllister, Caicedo, Mitoma. Now the problem is they go out and put a massive performance in like they did, 6-0. And that then further muddies the water for FPL managers, because had they struggled, or had they only drawn the game, then you would have been thinking, well, Roberto De Zerbi won't be taking any chances further down the line. But on the back of that performance, and yes, it was just Wolves, but you still have to go out there and do a job. He made 4 changes on Thursday night against Manchester United, and they fully deserved the victory, no matter how it came about. So yes, it's going to be difficult. And I was looking at this, just this morning in terms of, McAllister and Mitoma and Marsh were the 3 players who I gravitate towards. But now I'm thinking probably Estupinian is one that's probably locked in on that left-hand side. He doesn't really have many other options. And I'm even thinking as an outside differential Dinnery pick is Danny Welbeck. I know you can see Undive up there. Evan Ferguson is a 50-50 shout, but De Zerbi said he won't be taking any risks with him. So it could be, even if he does return to the squad, I wouldn't expect many minutes, only maybe to come from the bench. The other big talking point this weekend or for the upcoming game week would be on that right-hand side and at right back. Now, I have gambled on including Pascal Gross, who didn't feature against Man United. There is hope and optimism that he can recover, but we're trying to foresee what's going to happen over the next couple of days. So that's why we do have him playing at right back. If he doesn't make it, then you would expect maybe Moses Caicedo to drop into the right-hand side to deputise, and maybe that then opens a slot up for Billy Gilmore in midfield alongside McAllister.
Interesting. I love a differential Dinnery pick. You always seem to pick some really good ones as well, Ben. And just, for people, keep an eye on your 888 articles. In fact, probably when we get to Crystal Palace, you have a differential Dinnery betting pick as well, which you quite like, which we'll discuss. But Chelsea, before we get to Crystal Palace, again, must be difficult to choose the team. I think Lampard doesn't even know his best 11. I think nobody does. This is almost the problem with the team. But what is the latest there?
Yeah, there's very little change or no change at all. They came through that game on Tuesday night unscathed in terms of physical injuries, although psychologically it was another hammer blow, particularly for Frank Lampard. Yeah. There's got to be changes in this team, and I really think he's scratching his head on who comes in. I have thrown Ziyech in there. I mean, Christian Pulisic wasn't even included in the matchday squad on Tuesday night. I was a little bit surprised he went with Cesar Azpilicueta again. Maybe that was just a little bit of a hark back to, those players that the tried and tested of his first tenure. Um, you know, I don't know. He did speak about the possibility of Badia Shield, maybe, returning and very, very close to returning to that starting lineup. But, who does he drop? I can't really see him dropping either Thiago Silva or Wesley Fofana. So there may be a slight tweak in the formation again, maybe go with a 3-5-2. I think Raheem Sterling has been absolutely garbage. And doesn't deserve a place in the 11. But João Felix, is he a player who won't be staying beyond that loan spell? So that's why he is maybe lacking that involvement. We called the Aubameyang start against Arsenal, but he got the hook after 45 minutes. So I can't even see him starting any more games. Just a really difficult lineup, to try and predict. And to be honest, as an FPL manager, are there any assets that we even want to consider, for our teams during the run-in?
Definitely not. There's a lot of problems at Chelsea, and I'm staying well away from them. They're not one of those teams that I think you can count on definitely getting lots of points against, but at the moment you can't invest in them either. Now, Ben, I want to give the shout out that you wanted to discuss with Crystal Palace, because I've noticed it as well. A lot of people think that Tottenham are going to win this game, but for some reason, looking at the predicted data, things like that, Crystal Palace aren't in it, even though they've been on a better run. I'd say they're a better team at the moment. Tottenham are in absolute shambles. I feel like this one is almost a dead cert for Crystal Palace, don't you?
I was very impressed with the performance last week. It was a great game, entertaining. I was maybe a little bit surprised that Roy Hodgson threw Wilfried Zaha straight back into the mix following that adductor problem. He's going to be even better, this week with another full week of training under his belt. That in sharpness will improve. So yeah, when I was looking at that, and I just thought, we know that toxic culture that seems to be going around that Tottenham camp at the moment, albeit it has improved slightly under Ryan Mason. And maybe people are looking at that second half performance at Anfield for Spurs and thinking, he's maybe galvanized that squad. And I can see that. But when I looked at the odds just for, maybe a Palace winner, I was looking at those two sides to be fairly evenly matched, if all honesty. But to see Tottenham odds on and then Palace it better than 3-1, I'm not necessarily a betting man, but that is something that did pique my interest, and I'll probably have just a few of my hard-earned pennies on that Palace win, just because, like I say, I think not only performances but everything about they have the momentum. I think it's 4 from 6 now that Roy Hodgson has won, 1 defeat and 1 draw, whereas Tottenham, like I say, are coming off the back of that horrendous run, and I expect them to finish outside of those European qualifying spots.
Yeah, and the thing is, as well as Crystal Palace, they're already playing well, and now Zaha's back in the team as well. It's kind of like moving from strength to strength for the side. There's a lot of positivity going on there. There's a feel-good factor at the club. And yeah, I think you're right to kind of pinpoint that as maybe something overlooked. So then we've got Brian Morrissey said Palace should win that easily. They're on a high. Spurs. Oh, Spurs. Yes. Woob Gaming wants to bring it back quickly to Chelsea. He's asked, why no Madueke?
I mean, he did return. He was included in that team. He's on Tuesday night. I've seen a couple of performances. I dare say I haven't been overly impressed. Would be the short answer. I think Frank Lampard may be looking for scapegoats for Tuesday night, and he would be the obvious one. He's a new player. He's young, so that's why. And like I say, if you're going to bring in the likes of, as I have, maybe Hakim Ziyech, then it would be at the expense of him. But like I say, there could be wholesale changes, and that's not just a reflection of of him. I think we'll be looking for next season and beyond, for getting the best performances out of these players. It will take a time to acclimatise and to adapt. And of course, they need a settled manager in place, have that structure, to have that confidence and to build on that foundation. At the minute, it's the whole thing, pardon me French, is a complete shit show.
Very good French there. FPL Rubber Ducky says, here we quack. Let me just see if there's no more questions. So we're going to move to Everton now. But just remember, people, we're going to go through the teams alphabetically. So just time your questions in and around there. Bit like what Woob Gaming has done there with asking about Midwake. But yeah, the Toffees, very tough run in. I don't know if they're going to get out of this relegation battle, on top. But what is the injury news there?
Yeah, the big one is at right back. We see the return of Seamus Coleman on Monday night, but unfortunately stretch it off. Initial thoughts or concerns were that it was an ACL problem. That isn't the case. Sean Dyche confirmed that he has been evaluated. There was no damage to that ACL, although the fullback is unlikely to return against this season. From looking at that footage, we're probably looking at maybe MCL, that medial collateral, and potentially some meniscal damage. So who comes in at right back? Well, Ben Godfrey, he's injured, so he's out of contention. Mason Holgate is available again following after serving a one-match ban, but I'm going for Patterson, the young guy who came in off the bench. I think he deserves another chance to start. I'm also throwing Unana back in there. Illness restricted him to a place on the bench last time out. I think he comes back in, and I'm seeing a slight change in formation from Sean Dyson. I'm going with a 4-2-3-1.
Oh, interesting. Onana is one of those players that if Everton do go down, I'd love to see him at Arsenal. I think he's a classy player. Fulham up next. Now, as always, Ben, we ask you, what day is Mitrovic returning?
What day indeed, Jason? I mean, you tell me.
Well,
We are now coming up to game 7 of an 8-match ban.
Yes. Well, I'm gonna mull it over, see if anybody in the comments. It would be around May the 12th plus once.
You're very close, Jason. It's 15 minus 2. So next week's stream. Fingers crossed you get it right, and I might give you a slice of cake.
Oh, love that. Oh, actually, that's quite enticing, isn't it? A bit of cake. But yeah, let's get serious with the team news of Fulham. What is the latest there, apart from obviously the aforementioned Mitrovic absence?
Yeah, unfortunately, we've seen Tim Reid and Andreas Pereira started every Premier League game this season until they picked up season-ending injuries last weekend, and that obviously kept them out of the game at Anfield. Very disappointing for the Cottagers. On the receiving end of, Marco Silva would say a very disappointing refereeing decision when Darwin Núñez was being adjudged to have been fouled in the box. He said Diop caught Dalian, I think it was. Took far too long, and Núñez come in, and the rest, as I say, is history when Mo Salah stepped up. So we've seen, I think it was 4 changes from the Cottagers. Kenny Tete, Harrison Reed, they all dropped out. To be honest, I expect those players to be thrust back in to that starting 11. So not a great deal of change. The decision maybe up front will become between Vinicius and Dan James. Obviously, I've went for James in this instance. And Willian has been managing a little bit of a hamstring niggle. He did return midweek, but if there are concerns about playing another game in relatively quick succession, then Manor Solomon would be the player to come in on that left-hand side.
So continuing with the discussions here, we've got Matty. He says 21st of May on his birthday. Slightly out. Got right that it's your birthday, but a bit 8 days out there. We've got a question from GV. He says, last 2 game weeks of the season, do you think that DCL can become a punt? Would you roll the dice on him?
Would I roll the dice? And it would really be a roll of the dice because we have, very little to go on. In terms of getting that sharpness and playing himself back in, he's certainly looking a lot better. Um, but the pressures at Everton, um, oh, it's a big call. Look, it depends on how you want to see your season out. Most people, probably barring the exception of me, have all got Haaland in there. Um, whether you believe maybe Tottenham can still push and whether Harry Kane can still deliver as he has done for most of the campaign. So that would leave maybe one slot. Then you're looking at maybe those informed players, the Isaacs, maybe the Callum Wilsons of this world. So at the expense of maybe one of those players, maybe not. But if you want to go totally rogue and go for that Maverick pick and just enjoy yourself on these last few game weeks, then why not? Like I say, Everton have it all to play for. They need to roll the dice. And if anybody's going to score for Everton, you would think it's got to be DCL.
I just have to nip off here, but Leeds up next, Ben. Can you give everybody the information on that?
Yeah, not much in terms of team use from Sam Allardyce. Of course, he hasn't been in post long. So in terms of injury news, we know who's out, and Liam Cook was forced off last weekend. We don't know how long, potentially season ending. We've got Max Vuba, who comes in on that left-hand side, sitting centrally with Robin Koch. Had Javi Gracia been in charge, I would have expected, again, wholesale changes. The big talking point was questions with regards to Meslier. He's faced a lot of flack for those performances and being blamed for a lot of those goals that have been conceded. Sam Allardyce admits that it's probably his biggest decision of the weekend on whether to start, I think, the 23-year-old. He talked about, his performances in training. There aren't any issues, but he did reference the fact that he's not really playing under pressure there. And obviously, once you get during that game, it's a different beast. So Meslier is one who is potentially at risk of dropping out. Maybe Robles would be the player that comes in, but certainly, from an FPL aspect, I wouldn't be considering any of those players anyway.
Now, apologies, I had to answer the door there. Nobody else is in the house, so I had to let a package in. Leicester City up next, the Foxes. Actually, before we get to them, we've got FPL Matty. He said, it is Ben's birthday. Colmes says, is the 13th of May World Cocktails Day?
It could be on the 13th of May this year.
Yeah.
There will certainly be cocktails flowing.
So we'll see if Leicester or the Foxes can get their groove flowing in these final games of the season. Yes, but what is the latest there?
I'm not expecting a great deal of change to the Foxes lineup. Maybe not the best performance against Everton, that 2-2 draw, but they got a point. On the left-hand side, it seems to be a bit of a toss-up between Christensen, as I've got, or maybe Luke Thomas. Elsewhere, I don't really see maybe Johnny Evans pushing for a recall following illness and injury. Interesting from Dean Smith. Jamie Vardy looks rejuvenated under the new boss. Comes in at 9.1 million. I think he's got returns in his last 3 games. So maybe he is a bit of a maverick FPL punt for those remaining matches. Like I say, Leicester do have something to play for. And yeah, that's pretty much as you were. Maddison, question marks over, whether he'll retain spot kick responsibilities. Of course, he tried to go straight down the middle and he was outfoxed by the T-Rex himself, Jordan Pickford. And Dean Smith said they will have discussions around the possibility of who may take the penalties in those remaining fixtures.
The T-Rex. Magic has asked, did I get shoes as well? Unfortunately, the package isn't for me. It's actually for my gran, so not actually all that interesting. It could be shoes for her though. I don't actually know what it is. I just got a call from the delivery person, and I don't want to upset FPL Gran, who is actually doing very, very well in FPL at the moment. She's I think she's about 100 points ahead of me. So really we should have her on the show instead of me hosting. Liverpool up next though. The Reds, as you said there, Ben, 5 wins in a row. They're looking very good in terms of it. Even though on the eye test, I agree with you. They haven't looked amazing. Defence seems to be a big issue still. But what is the latest in terms of their injury news? Is it positive over Anfield?
Not too bad, generally speaking. I probably will tweak this lineup. This was a 1:30 press conference from Jurgen Klopp. There are concerns or doubts over the fitness of Jordan Henderson, and I did question whether I would include him anyway. He said not a player that does, he is able to play, more than, certainly not 3 games in a week. So it could be Harvey Elliott that comes in on that right-hand side. I've also went with Joel Matip at centre-back alongside Van Dijk. That's because Ibrahima Konate has been managed in recent weeks. There was a muscle fatigue issue, so more of a precautionary measure. And again, it's just a decision based on that thinking. I think Matip was a little bit unfortunate after coming in, scoring the winner, and then dropping straight out the 11. So, I think, Jurgen Klopp is happy and comfortable starting him in there. And that's why I've gone with him. And in attack, Diego Jota picked up, it's referenced as a back problem. It's actually a rib issue that he had going into that Tottenham game. Unfortunately, he took another heavy knock just moments after coming on against Spurs. That restricted him, to a place on the bench. And again, I think any, minutes will be limited again, just, given the situation, and also looking at the fact that, Liverpool have a wealth of attacking options, of course, with those 3 players and Luis Diaz all vying for those places.
FPL Rubber Ducky has said Gran is a weird nickname for your girlfriend, but whatever floats your boat. We all have weird nicknames for our girlfriends or boyfriends. Again, no judgments here on that. I've heard many times you've been called Daddy, Mr. Ben. Is that a verifiable fact?
That's a question for another day, another podcast, and one for me OnlyFans accounts.
That Daddy Dinnery, that should be the name of your OnlyFans account instead of differentials. Big D. FPL Rubber Ducky, good comment there. Also, he says Salah a real captaincy option this week. Now, FPL Big Head has asked a question about Liverpool. He said, why can't Jota seem to stay fit? What is going on with Diogo Jota, Ben?
It's an impact injury. Football is a contact sport. These things happen. He's not the biggest and he's not the most robust, attacker that you'll come across. Some big burly centre halves, and they will want to make an impression. And like I say, he's picked up a little bit of a knock, nothing too serious. It is being managed. There's no need to take any risks, particularly when you've got 5 players vying for those front 3. That's just the way it is. I'd be more concerned if it was another muscle problem coming off the back of calf and hamstring issues. So, like I say, just a little bit unfortunate. That's just the way it is.
Now, Manchester City this game week seem to have the perfect fixture, but there's concerns over rotation, isn't there? As we get to this kind of point of the season, Pep loves it. He loves a rotation, but also the reality is he's doing it because they're pushing deep into a lot of tournaments. Champions League, they'll be keeping an eye on that game with Real Madrid. And we saw Edison, was part of that rotation, but seemingly the only one that we would trust. And now even he cannot be trusted to start. But a lot of worries that this could be extended to Haaland. he's obviously been managed this season, his first season in the Premier League. He obviously had that injury as well. But, you know, a young player physically adapting to the Premier League, what do you think the reality is? Is he going to play the whole 90 against Leeds? Will he play a little bit? Or do you think he could be rested totally?
No, I'm not. I'm not seeing Haaland being rested. You know, full stop. If Haaland is fit and available, he starts. Probably does his business. Ideally, gets that done nice and early, and he comes off and he's fully refreshed for that Real Madrid tie. So I have Haaland starting. You know, Pep has been asked about potentially, you know, rotating and resting players. As always, he defaults to the final session, which is after his press conference, and he said he will talk to players and see how they feel. Of course, everybody's going to want to be involved in these games, in this run-in. I don't see many changes in that. You know, when you've got that momentum, when you've got that confidence, when you're winning games, you know, fatigue isn't really a factor in that process. And yeah, look, they will be taking each game at a time, and they won't look too far beyond Leeds. You know, even with Sam Allardyce, and he hasn't had much time to maybe have an impact in. And I think City will go strong, and then I expect Pep to make changes early in the game. You know, anywhere from that 45 to 60-minute mark, providing, like I say, if City have got that 2 or potentially 3 goal lead, or even more.
We've got a question from Mini FPL. He's saying Alvarez and Haaland both to start. What do you think?
Well, the lineup says that I've went against Alvarez, and I've actually chucked in Phil Foden. I just thought this was maybe a good opportunity for him to get his first start in a while and get that little bit of fitness and that little bit of sharpness. And of course, yes, that does mean that Julian Alvarez is out of the lineup, but it's a bit of a gamble for Haaland, without any question. You know, he starts. So we'll see. I've tried to take a little bit of a punt there.
And a lot of people are invested in De Bruyne. With that situation there, would you get him out of your team? He's a big, expensive asset. You know, somebody like Salah is definitely going to play. Would you rather invest your money elsewhere, especially because of the fact that this is the run-in towards the end of the season? Now is where you have to act. You can't wait on players to come in and out of teams, can you?
There are, you know, obviously the injury and him missing the last 2 matches is a slight worry. He did rejoin the group on Thursday and he trained really well. So, in effect, I do fully expect Kevin De Bruyne to be included in the matchday squad. I think maybe Guardiola will potentially see that game as Leeds is a good opportunity for De Bruyne to get a 25-minute run out and then start against Real Madrid. And like I say, it depends on other factors in and around, you know, that Premier League title race on how City may line up going forward.
And then we got one more question on Man City. Is Ederson definitely starting?
I think he has to. You know, it wasn't. I wouldn't say performances have been so poor that he merited a drop out the team. So therefore, you have to, you know, always a risk at maybe taking Pep on his word, but just an opportunity to refresh, you know, and take Ederson, you know, out of the firing line for a few minutes, and of course give Stefan Ortega a taste of life in the Premier League. He's had that decent result, got that clean sheet. I think, you know, if it starts stretching beyond that, you know, then you're going to have somebody like Ederson who's asking questions and saying, well, you know, why? And you don't really want to upset, you know, the apple cart. So for me, Ederson comes straight back in, unless, you know, there's some kind of underlying issue which hasn't been disclosed.
Like Cancelo. Not saying that that's what's happening, but you know that we saw something like that earlier in the season. I've put it in the chat so that everybody can get involved with this, along the lines of our discussions of your OnlyFans. Finish the sentence. Daddy Dinnery's big ... So
Point Hall.
Column says differential. Giandre's come in with a banger. He says that I'm late to the discussions, but I'm pretty sure Ben has a PhD, a pretty huge ...
Differential.
So on to differentials, or maybe not differentials. I'm not a big fan of the Man United team for this game week. I think they might struggle against West Ham. But what is the injury news there? Are there any boosts or positives that people can look forward to?
Of course, we're less than 24 hours post-match from that Brighton defeat. Players will still be evaluated and being assessed, and you'll have your usual knocks and niggles and minor ailments, but there's nothing serious to report at this point. So the squad should more or less be the same. What we do know is that Alejandro Garnacho is closing on a return. That's been an ankle ligament problem. I think he rejoined the group on maybe Tuesday or Wednesday, so he has had a little bit of training in his legs, and maybe game week 36 potentially for return to the match day squad. Positions which are maybe up for discussion: I do have Luke Shaw back in at left back with Harry Maguire alongside Victor Lindelof. Of course, that could easily be switched around with maybe Wan-Bissaka at right back and Diogo Dalot on the left-hand side. Thrown Christian Eriksen back in after he was rested, and also Sabitzer. I've dropped Anthony. I'm not a fan of Anthony, to be honest. Flatters to deceive. So I put actually Bruno Fernandes out on the right-hand side, which I think we've seen back in the Manchester derby with Sancho on the left, dropping Anthony Martial because, he's not really firing at the moment, with Marcus Rashford leading the United attack.
Mini FPL says Wan-Bissaka absolutely bossed Mitoma. No way he gets dropped, surely. What do you think on that, Ben?
Look, I mean, this is one, again, that was done. There could be one or two changes in and around that. There have been concerns or issues maybe with Wan-Bissaka playing a lot of games in quick succession. And it was more, not necessarily of individual performance, but maybe just a little bit of a freshening up of the team. I still think Erik ten Hag would prefer Dalot over Wan-Bissaka, which is why I went with the number 20. We'll see. I'll have a bit of a think about that one. You know, you're right, he's been in good form, but we've seen a lot of good performances from Wan-Bissaka this season, and ultimately Erik ten Hag hasn't been afraid to drop him out of that starting 11. But whether he believes or trusts in Harry Maguire enough to start him is probably the big question, because if he does, then we'll see that. But if he doesn't, then, Shaw goes in at centre-back.
Toonami up next. What is the latest from Newcastle?
I think this week we could see the Isak and Callum Wilson partnership unleashed for the first time from the beginning of the match. Anthony Gordon, again, failed to grasp his opportunity last weekend. In Sean Longstaff, may train either today or tomorrow. But even if he does, I don't think that puts him in a position to start. So we have Joe Linton, who switches across to that right-hand side. But elsewhere, I'm pretty much seeing Newcastle, pretty much locked in from that performance against Southampton.
Nottingham Forest up next, and just to remind you, Ben, we're a little bit over already, so we'll quickly get through the rest of the teams.
We haven't heard from Steve Cooper as it stands, but there are slight concerns over Danilo and Brennan Johnson, so that'll be one to watch. Amiomi, he played for Newcastle. Womini. He had a shoulder problem going into last weekend's game, which restricted minutes. John Joe Shelby as well. Apparently there's no disciplinary issues to really worry about. It's more of a calf problem, so maybe we'll see him back. But like I say, so this lineup will change once we have confirmation of team news.
Southampton up next. Any news there?
Yeah, pretty much as you were as well. One potential returner would be that Paul Onuachu. That was a tendon in his knee problem. Um, hasn't really found his feet since arriving at the club, so don't expect too many changes. It is last chance saloon for the Saints.
Tottenham up next. As we said there, I think Crystal Palace can beat them. But what is the latest injury news there?
Hugo Lloris has been ruled out for the season, which locks in Fraser Forster. Elsewhere around the pitch, we've seen Oliver Skip get caught on the head by Diego Jota after he came on last weekend. That was just a superficial cut, nothing serious there, no concussion or what have you. So we have Skip starting. Two main talking points. Does Richarlison start over Kulusevski? I think he does. And also Ben Davies over Clement Langley.
And Marius says memories when the Amiobi brothers played for Newcastle there with the butchering of
Shola and Sammy, yeah.
Yeah. West Ham up next. They're on a good run. Could cause problems, but what is the latest for the Hammers?
So there was a couple of surprise omissions midweek. Thomas Souček, Declan Rice, and also Nayef Aguerd. There's a sickness bug sweeping through that West Ham camp. And we also have two unnamed players. One has already been sent home, and another one is complaining of a stomach problem. So potentially two players who are expected to maybe miss out. Those three players that didn't feature against Man City are all back on the training pitches. Vladimir Sufal picked up a hamstring issue. He's out. That's why we put Tino Kira on the right. If not, it would be Ben Johnson. And hopefully Nayef Aguerd is okay and he would sit alongside not Kurt Zuma. So this would need to be changed. He's rolled his ankle against Palace. We're looking at a few weeks, so we're probably looking at maybe Ogbonna for that one.
I quite like the chant that Crystal Palace made up for when he was taken off the pitch as well. I don't know if you heard that one, Ben.
I can guess. I don't think may pick that one up.
It was something to do with his cat and how it was a bit of karma there, which I definitely agree with. I still don't understand how you can play such a terrible human being, but there it goes. We're not going to talk about the morality of football today because we're winding up the injury news. Wolves, final team of this game week. What is the latest there?
Yeah, the big concern was over the availability of Nelson Semedo. Come back. He was forced off last weekend, and Lopetegui referenced that as a dangerous and a heavy and a hard knee problem. It only meant he missed a couple of sessions, so he's trained with the group since Thursday, so that's fine. It remains to be seen whether he makes wholesale changes following that terrible performance against Brighton, or does he keep the faith, write that one off as just being one of those days at the office to forget. And yeah, like I say, it remains to be seen, but I have went with the nucleus of those players.
Okay, super duper final quick question: should I sell Jota this week for Isaac, or keep Jota and hope he starts? What do you think, Ben?
I don't think Jota starts. I really don't. I don't think he's fit enough. I don't think he's getting enough minutes on the training pitches. Therefore, I do expect Alexander Isak and Callum Wilson to lead Newcastle's attack.
There you go.
There's your answer.
There you go. Well, thank you for tuning in, everybody. Hopefully next week we'll be back to full running. It was as smooth as we possibly could with my new computer, but we're ironing out some of the concerns here. But thank you so much for tuning in. Remember to hit that subscribe button, hit the like button, and we will be back for all your injury news. And we just wish you the best of luck, especially Ducky. He said he's had a bad few game weeks. Well, hopefully you turn it around with this latest injury news. But for now, from both of us, a goodbye and a good luck.